David Ben-Gurion was born David Gruen on October 16, 1886, in Plonsk, a town in north-central Poland with a Jewish presence that went back to the 16th century. He grew to manhood immersed in that brief but radiant phenomenon in our people's history that might be called shtetl Zionism. When he was a teenager, his father, Avigdor Gruen, wrote to Theodor Herzl, the Zionist visionary, asking his advice on his gifted youngster's education. Herzl, busy organizing his Zionist movement, apparently didn't find the time to write back. How could he know that in less than 50 years this promising lad would be the man whose iron will would translate his dreams into reality? As in so many of the towns and villages of the Pale of Settlement, most of the people in Plonsk, which was 45 miles from Warsaw, were Jewish. As the 19th century wore on, many were touched by the winds of modernity and emancipation, and by the Haskalah, which blew across Europe from west to east, changing the centuries-old pattern of life in the ancient Jewish communities. A minority channeled their newly acquired intellectual energies into the revival of Hebrew language and literature. Among these was Zvi Ari Gruen, David's grandfather, and a formative influence on his young life. Zvi Ari was among the first in the district to join the Hovevei Zion, literally Lovers of Zion, a movement founded in the early 1880s that encouraged agricultural settlement in Palestine. Note: the Pale was a swath of territory in the Western Russian Empire where permanent Jewish residence was permitted. It included much of present-day Lithuania, Belarus, Poland, Bessarabia, and Ukraine, and parts of Western Russia. But it excluded some of the major cities within that area. The Haskalah, literally Enlightenment, was a loose movement of intellectuals promoting secular learning and modern modes of studying Jewish texts. Avigdor was a sort of unofficial attorney at law, a familiar figure in the Pale at that time, who helped people with their legal problems. He was among the first in Plonsk to set aside the more traditional Jewish garb in favor of the frock coat and winged collar that suited his profession. The Gruens, though not rich, were a comfortable family. But they were stricken by tragedy when David, an introspective boy, was only 11. His mother, Shendel, whom he doted on, died in childbirth. It was her 11th confinement. 5 of the children lived, 3 boys, of whom David was the youngest, and 2 girls. David now grew even closer to his father. There was one episode of tension, common to many Jewish families at the time, when the young David, after his bar mitzvah, refused to continue putting on his tefillin. But it didn't last. Note: tefillin are phylacteries, or black leather boxes containing parchment scrolls with handwritten passages from the Bible. Males over 13 are required to don them each morning at the start of prayers. At 14, David founded his first party. Not a political party, but rather an ideological society of like-minded boys in Plonsk that he named Ezra, after the biblical scribe who led the return of the Israelites from the Babylonian exile in the 5th century BCE. The boys studied Hebrew and discussed the weighty issues of the day affecting the Jewish people. Chief among them was what was called within the Zionist movement territorialism, which was the idea, supported at first even by Herzl himself, that the Jews make do with a territory of their own somewhere other than in Palestine, perhaps in British-administered Uganda. This would be, at the very least, an interim solution to help the Jews escape the steadily worsening threat of rampant European anti-Semitism. The young members of Ezra were dismayed and outraged at the idea. Sitting on the banks of the river Plonka that ran through Plonsk, David and his comrades drafted their response to the Uganda Plan, which had been submitted to the 1903 Sixth Zionist Congress in Basel. We have reached the conclusion, they asserted, that the way to fight Ugandism is to make aliyah. Aliyah, literally ascent, is the Hebrew term for immigration to Eretz Israel. They were not yet adults, but their thinking of that time